For decades, fans have wondered what really happened between Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood. They were more than bandmates, they were brothers in music, mischief, and madness. From wild tours to late-night studio sessions, their bond built some of the most unforgettable rock moments of the 1970s. But behind the curtain, the relationship between these two legends wasn't always the glamorous, guitar-driven friendship fans imagined. There were secrets, there were tensions, and there were long years of silence. Now, at 80 years old, Rod Stewart is finally breaking that silence, and what he reveals is something no one expected. Over the years, fans noticed subtle signs that something wasn't quite right. Interviews where Rod avoided questions about Ronnie, performances where the two men seemed distant, rumors about disagreements, personal struggles, and a heartbreaking moment that nearly split their friendship forever. But Rod never addressed any of it, not once. He stayed quiet out of respect, out of loyalty, or perhaps out of pain. Until now. In a recent sit-down conversation, Rod Stewart opened up for the first time about his complicated, emotional, and deeply personal history with Ronnie Wood, his longtime friend, his partner in chaos, and in many ways, the brother he never had. What he shared stunned fans, shocked interviewers, and left even those closest to him speechless. Because Rod didn't just talk about the music, he talked about the moments that nearly ended their bond, and the moment that saved it. This is the truth behind one of rock's most legendary friendships, told by the man who lived it. Long before fame, fortune, and the roar of stadium crowds, Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood crossed paths in London's lively, gritty music scene of the late 1960s. They were both young, hungry, and determined to carve their names into rock history. Rod was already developing the raspy, soulful voice that would define a generation, while Ronnie was bouncing between bands, his guitar skills earning respect in every smoky room he entered. From the first moment they played together, there was chemistry and unspoken connection that musicians rarely find. Rod would later describe it as instant brotherhood, the kind of bond that didn't need explanation. They understood each other musically, emotionally, even spiritually. Both came from modest beginnings, both carried that fire to prove themselves, and both were drawn to the rebellious, untamed world of rock. When they joined forces in the Faces, everything changed. The band was a chaotic cocktail of talent, trouble, and pure energy, and Rod and Ronnie were at the center of it. Off stage, they were partners in every kind of mischief imaginable: pranks, drinking, all-night recording sessions, and road antics that would have broken lesser friendships. On stage, they were unstoppable. Ronnie's guitar lifted Rod's vocals, and Rod's voice elevated Ronnie's playing. Fans didn't just watch them, they felt their connection. But as their fame grew, so did the pressure. Rod's solo career took off like a meteor. Suddenly, he wasn't just a singer, he was an icon. And while Ronnie celebrated his success, there were moments of tension neither man was prepared for. The band felt the shift. Schedules clashed, priorities changed. There were emotional moments between Rod and Ronnie that the public never saw: conversations about loyalty, resentment, fear of drifting apart. Despite it all, their brotherhood endured. Rod often described Ronnie as the one person who could make him laugh even in the darkest moments. Ronnie, in turn, said Rod had a way of grounding him during the wildest years of the Faces' fame. They remained inseparable, their friendship surviving even when the band struggled. And then came the moment that changed everything. When Ronnie left to join the Rolling Stones, Rod supported the decision publicly, but privately, it hit him harder than anyone knew. He once admitted, "It felt like I was losing a limb." Their musical partnership, the one that started it all, suddenly had a wall between it. Rod kept touring, Ronnie kept climbing, and although they never fought publicly, the distance between them grew silently. But even as life pulled them in different directions, different careers, different pressures, different worlds, the early bond they built never truly disappeared. Rod never said it out loud, but those first years with Ronnie were some of the most formative of his entire life. And now, at 80, Rod Stewart is finally ready to reveal what really happened when their paths split, and the one secret he kept hidden for decades. For all the wild nights, the laughter, and the brotherhood Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood shared, There was a silent fracture brewing beneath the surface, one powerful enough to shake the foundation of their decades-long friendship. And for the first time at 80, Rod finally admitted just how deep that wound went. It began slowly, almost invisibly. When Ronnie joined the Rolling Stones in 1975, the world celebrated him. The media praised the move as destiny. Fans cheered. Even Rod publicly congratulated him, calling him the perfect fit. But behind closed doors, Rod struggled with a feeling he had never confronted before: abandonment. Too many. Rod seemed unstoppable: massive tours, chart-topping singles, global fame. But what people didn't see was the emotional impact of losing the person who had been his musical equal, his creative opposite, and his partner in chaos. Ronnie didn't just leave a band. He left the life they built together. Rod later explained it this way: "It felt like watching your best friend walk onto a train you couldn't follow." And at the time, Ronnie didn't realize how deeply it affected him. Their phone calls grew shorter. Their visits grew rare. Weeks turned into months, months into years. And fame did what fame always does: it stretched the distance even further. Rod was becoming a global pop rock sensation while Ronnie was settling into the rhythm of life with one of the most legendary bands on earth. Even when they crossed paths backstage or at award shows, something felt off. They hugged, they laughed, they joked, but the spark, the easy, natural, unbreakable flow had dimmed. Their conversations had a politeness to them that never used to exist, and both men felt it but didn't know how to fix it. One moment in particular painted the full picture. Rod once recalled seeing Ronnie at a festival in the early 1980s. It should have been a joyful reunion. Instead, Rod found himself standing in front of his old friend feeling like a stranger. Ronnie was surrounded by security, press, and the massive machine that came with being a Rolling Stone. Rod, though equally famous, suddenly felt like the odd man out. After that night, Rod went back to his hotel room and admitted to himself something he never dared to say aloud. He missed the old Ronnie. The world didn't know it, but Rod's feelings turned into quiet resentment and unspoken expectation that Ronnie had outgrown their partnership. He was happy for his friend, yes, but he also felt left behind. Meanwhile, Ronnie felt something completely different. He thought Rod had moved on without him. From Ronnie's perspective, Rod was dominating the charts, selling out arenas, and crafting a career so massive that Ronnie assumed Rod simply didn't need him anymore. Ronnie even once said privately Rod was becoming Rod Stewart, the superstar, the legend. "I didn't think he needed the bloke with the guitar from the Faces, too." Men. To completely different interpretations, and not a single honest conversation between them. Years passed like this, both believing the other had drifted away intentionally. But the real breaking point came during a charity event in the 1990s. The two were scheduled to perform a short acoustic set together just the way they used to. Fans were thrilled. Reporters called it a Small Faces reunion. The energy backstage was electric. But right before the performance, tensions surfaced. The setlist changed. Someone disagreed about the arrangement. Someone else felt rushed. Both were exhausted from touring, and without meaning to, they snapped at each other. Not yelling, not fighting, but a sharp exchange of words that cut deeper because of everything unspoken behind it. They performed. They smiled. The crowd went wild. But something had broken that night. For years afterward, the two men slipped into a rhythm of friendly distance, warm when they met, nostalgic when they talked, but never close enough to fully repair what had been lost. Bandmates felt it. Friends felt it. Even interviewers noticed the shift. Rod said nothing publicly. Ronnie said nothing publicly. And the world assumed the two rock icons were simply too busy for each other. But the truth was far more painful. Two brothers had drifted apart and neither knew how to fix it. What Rod Stewart reveals next at age 80 explains exactly how their friendship was saved. For years, Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood drifted in and out of each other's lives, like two satellites caught in separate orbits, close enough to feel the pull, but never close enough to collide. Fans assumed their friendship was fine. The media painted them as lifelong brothers, and whenever they appeared side by side, the cameras caught two legends smiling as if nothing had ever come between them. But behind the scenes, the distance was real. And both men felt it. It wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't betrayal. It was something far simpler. Time. Time had changed them. Time had changed their careers. Time had created gaps that neither man knew how to cross. But life has a strange way of forcing clarity at unexpected moments. For Rod and Ronnie, that moment came in the early 2000s. Rod received a phone call he would never forget. Ronnie Wood had been hospitalized after years of struggling with addiction, a battle he'd fought quietly. While the world praised his charisma, his humor, and his legendary guitar work, the news hit. And then Ronnie said something that changed everything. "I thought you forgot about me, mate." Rod felt the words like a punch. For years, he had believed Ronnie didn't need him anymore. Now he was realizing Ronnie had felt exactly the same way. In that moment, every unspoken misunderstanding between them came crashing down. Rod reached over, put a hand on his friend's shoulder, and said quietly, "I never forgot you. Not for a single day." Ronnie later admitted that hearing those words softened something inside him that had been hardened by years of assumptions. And Rod, for the first time, understood just how isolated Ronnie had felt. During his darkest moments, they talked for hours. Not about fame. Not about the industry. Not about the faces or the Stones or tours or albums. They talked about life. About growing older. About their families. About regret. About the truth neither had ever dared say. They missed being brothers. That hospital visit became the turning point. Rod began checking in more often. Ronnie opened up more than he ever had. The two started talking regularly, honest conversations, not surface-level reunion chatter. Years of tension dissolved naturally, replaced by a closeness that felt familiar but deeper than before. And then came the moment fans had waited decades for. Rod suggested they perform together again, not for money, not for publicity, but simply because they wanted to. Ronnie agreed immediately. When they stepped onto the stage side by side, the chemistry that once defined their youth came roaring back. However, this time, it wasn't fueled by chaos or ego. It was fueled by gratitude. Their banter returned, their laughter returned, and the ease, the effortless, instinctive connection that made them icons returned, as if it had never left. Rod later said privately that seeing Ronnie play that night felt like getting a piece of my life back. Ronnie said performing with Rod again reminded him of why I fell in love with music in the first place. Fans felt it too. This wasn't just nostalgia. It was healing on display. And from that point on, their friendship wasn't just repaired, it was stronger, wiser, and far more meaningful than it had ever been. But Rod Stewart's most emotional revelation, the one he kept buried for years, was still to come when Rod Stewart finally sat down for a recent interview at age 80 and opened up about Ronnie Wood. Fans expected stories, funny ones, wild ones, maybe even a few confessions from their youth. What no one expected was the emotional depth of what Rod revealed. Because after years of silence, distance, misunderstandings, and reconciliation, he finally confessed the truth he had kept buried for more than decades. It began softly, almost cautiously. Rod looked down, folded his hands, and said, "There's something I've never said publicly about Ronnie, because I didn't know how." The room went quiet. Even the interviewer leaned forward. Rod took a breath and continued, "Ronnie saved me more times than he ever knew." It wasn't the answer fans expected, but it was the answer that explained everything. For all his fame, confidence, and charisma, Rod Stewart carried a secret struggle during many of his early years: a fear of failure, a fear of not being good enough, and a fear that someday the world would realize he didn't deserve the spotlight. It was Ronnie Wood, with his carefree humor and unshakable belief in Rod's talent, who kept him going. Rod explained that in the early years of the Faces, there were nights he doubted himself so deeply he considered walking away from music altogether. But Ronnie, often unknowingly, kept him grounded. He would crack a joke, drag Rod into a jam session, or remind him casually, effortlessly, why he belonged on the stage. "He never let me take myself too seriously," Rod said, "and when the pressure got too heavy, Ronnie made it feel light." But Rod never told him that, not once. And that silence became one of Rod's deepest regrets. As their careers evolved and their paths separated, Rod realized he had never acknowledged just how much Ronnie had shaped him, not just as a musician, but as a man. Instead, Rod let time and distance grow between them, believing Ronnie had moved on to a world where Rod no longer fit. But the real blow came years later. During Ronnie's health battles, Rod admitted something painfully honest. "I thought I'd lost the chance to tell him." It was that fear, that possibility of losing Ronnie forever without ever speaking the truth, that pushed Rod to reconnect, to show up, to bridge the gap they'd allowed to widen. And when he finally expressed his gratitude, something in their friendship shifted forever, according to Rod. Ronnie laughed one of his classic, warm, mischievous laughs and said, "Oh, Roddy, I always knew." Rod said that moment broke him, not in sadness, but in relief. Because after decades of guilt, regret, pride, and unspoken emotion, he realized that their bond had been intact all along, stronger than fame, distance, or misunderstanding. Ronnie had known how important he was. He had always known. Rod simply needed to say it out loud. In the interview, Rod grew emotional as he talked about aging, legacy, and the friendships that define a life more deeply than any award or career milestone. He said that reconnecting with Ronnie wasn't about nostalgia, it was about healing a piece of himself he didn't know was broken. And then Rod shared the most touching moment of all. "I told Ronnie I loved him, and he told me he loved me too." To rock legends, to brothers, finally saying the words they danced around for nearly 50 years. Today, Rod and Ronnie are closer than they've been since their wild youth. They talk often. They laugh about the past. They support each other through the challenges of growing older, the realities of health, and the evolving world of music. Rod says that as he looks back on his life, one truth stands out above the rest: music made us famous, but friendship made us whole. At 80 years old, Rod Stewart finally spoke up about Ronnie Wood, not to expose a secret, not to settle a score, but to express a lifetime of gratitude, love, and brotherhood, a truth he waited far too long to say.